This summer was supposed to be perfect for Megan, her older brother Oliver, and their mutual friend Tyler. Their parents had spent a long time choosing a camp, wanting the kids to enjoy a great experience without spending a fortune. Eventually, Tyler's mom found an affordable yet highly rated camp called Quiet Haven, which seemed like a paradise for teenagers. Oliver and Megan's parents didn't mind either, so the friends packed up and left for camp together the following week. The camp was located on the shores of a picturesque lake somewhere in New York State, far from the noise of big cities. The place looked like something straight out of a travel brochure. Wooden cabins, crisp air, well-maintained lawns, and the lake's surface glimmering under the sunlight. The arrival at camp was filled with excitement and anticipation. The sun was shining brightly, and it felt like only the best adventures awaited them. As always, Oliver was thrilled about everything. He cracked jokes and snapped photos at every step. Megan was captivated by the lake, already imagining evening boat rides, while Tyler was enthusiastically discussing their plans for a night game with flashlights. Quiet Haven made a fantastic first impression. The counselors were young and friendly, and the camp director, Mrs. Pierce, a petite, energetic woman with a broad smile, welcomed the newcomers warmly. She introduced them to the camp's activities, which included hiking, sports, and themed bonfire nights. The first few days went wonderfully. The teens spent their time swimming in the lake, climbing, and participating in competitions. Megan started thinking this might be one of the best summers of her life. Cozy evenings by the fire, laughter, jokes, and stories about old legends created moments she wanted to cherish forever. Oliver took the lead, organizing various activities, and Megan was happy that they were all enjoying every moment together. But one evening, things began to change. It started with small, barely noticeable details. On the fifth night, Megan couldn't sleep. Something in the air felt off. Lying in her cabin with the other girls, she suddenly heard a faint moaning sound coming from behind the wall. It sounded like muffled crying, and her heart trembled with fear. "What was that?" Megan whispered. "Maybe we just imagined it." The other girls tried to reassure her, though they clearly didn't believe it themselves. They had heard the strange noises too. The next day, while walking by the lake, Tyler, usually chatty, fell silent and stared off into the distance. When Megan came closer, he whispered, "Did you see that?" "See what?" she asked, puzzled. "Over there in the water. I thought I saw someone dive, but it was too fast." Megan saw nothing, only the calm, clear surface of the lake. But Tyler's words unsettled her. She felt as if a cold ripple from the water reached deep into her soul. Tyler's expression was so troubled that Megan couldn't brush it off. That evening, they gathered around the campfire with the other kids. Everything seemed normal, roasting marshmallows and sharing funny stories, but Megan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Although most of the campers were still there, a few kids she had seen earlier seemed to have disappeared. When Megan asked one of the counselors where they were, the response was vague. They just decided to head to bed early, no big deal. But the next morning, even more campers were missing. Megan felt certain that the group had thinned considerably. She also noticed that Oliver was acting strangely. He wasn't his usual lively self and started disappearing for hours, only to return late at night. She could faintly smell disinfectant on him, which was odd since the camp was nowhere near any medical facilities. Megan also began having strange dreams, so vivid that she struggled to tell them apart from reality. In her dreams, she wandered through endless hallways with dim walls and countless doors, hearing soft whispers. She saw children in white gowns walking by without acknowledging her, as if she didn't exist. There were rooms resembling hospital wards with thin metal beds strapped with restraints. At times, distant, eerie screams echoed through her dreams, faint but haunting. One night, Megan woke up in a state of paralysis, overcome by a dreadful feeling. In the darkness of the cabin, she noticed a shadow moving in the hallway just beyond the door. Her heart raced as the shadow drew closer. Gripping her flashlight, she flicked it on, only to reveal nothing. The other girls slept peacefully, as if nothing had happened. The anxiety inside Megan grew, becoming almost unbearable. She began to suspect that Quiet Haven wasn't just a peaceful camp for kids. Now, everything around her, the walls, the trees, felt like they were concealing dark secrets, waiting to be uncovered. The more time she spent in the camp, the clearer it became. This was no ordinary summer camp. Megan woke up early, just like she always did. The room with the other girls was quiet. She slowly got out of bed, stretched, and made her way to the bathroom. After brushing her teeth and checking herself in the mirror, she got dressed and headed to breakfast. In the dining hall, kids were already sitting at the tables, chatting, laughing, and eating. Megan walked past a few tables, looking for a seat, but suddenly realized she couldn't spot her brother. She sat down next to Tyler, who looked a little confused himself. "Where's Oliver?" she asked, a flicker of worry creeping into her voice. "When I woke up, he was already gone," Tyler replied, frowning. "I figured he went with you." Megan's concern grew. Her brother never missed breakfast. He was known for having a huge appetite. She tried to stay calm, but a sense of panic was bubbling up inside her. She and Tyler got up from the table to start looking for Oliver. They went around asking the other kids, but everyone just shrugged. "Maybe he's out for a walk?" one of the boys suggested, but Megan wasn't convinced it was that simple. Approaching one of the camp counselors, Megan asked, "Have you seen Oliver today?" "Oh, yes. He went to the painting workshop," the counselor said with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, he'll be back soon." Megan froze. Oliver? At a painting workshop? That made no sense at all. He always said painting was a waste of time and something he'd never do. "Something's not right," Megan whispered. "Yeah, Oliver hates painting," Tyler agreed. Determined to find out what was going on, they went to check the workshop. When they arrived, a handful of kids were focused on their artwork, but Oliver was nowhere to be seen. That confirmed their worst fears. Megan bit her lip nervously. "What do we do now?" she asked, trying not to panic. They searched other parts of the camp, checking several buildings, but found no trace of Oliver. Suddenly, they spotted a figure emerging from the edge of the woods. It was Oliver. "Oliver!" Megan called, waving her hand. He slowly approached them, but something about him seemed off. His expression was blank, and when they got closer, his voice was cold and distant. "What's with you two? Why are you acting so weird?" he asked sharply. "You were gone for half the day. Where were you?" Megan asked, her voice tight with concern. "We've been looking for you everywhere. Stop asking stupid questions. Why do you care where I was?" Oliver snapped, irritation in his voice. Without waiting for a response, he turned and headed back to his room. Megan stood frozen, barely holding back tears. Oliver was the person she cared about most, but right now he felt like a stranger. Tyler looked just as unsettled. Later that evening, as the kids gathered around the campfire, Megan and Tyler overheard a quiet conversation between two counselors. "We need to check everything tomorrow. He's almost ready," one counselor whispered. "The important thing is that no one notices anything strange." Megan and Tyler exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounding in fear. As the kids sang songs around the fire, Megan noticed Oliver quietly stand up and begin walking toward the woods, as if in a trance. Tyler noticed too and nudged her. "What's he doing?" she whispered, stunned by his strange behavior. "We have to follow him," Tyler whispered back. They crept after Oliver, careful not to be seen. The forest grew darker, the trees taller and more ominous. Their footsteps made barely any sound, lost in the thick silence of the woods. Oliver moved steadily, his steps eerily precise, like he was following some kind of invisible command. Suddenly, Oliver stopped in front of an old, abandoned house hidden deep in the forest. Slowly, he raised his hand and pushed the door open, as if he knew exactly what to do. Megan and Tyler stopped a few meters away, too scared to go closer. Something about Oliver's behavior chilled them to the bone. "What is this place?" Megan whispered, clutching Tyler's arm. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Tyler whispered back. Yet, A mixture of fear and curiosity kept them frozen in place. They watched as Oliver stepped inside the house and disappeared behind the door, leaving them standing in the dark, silent woods. What's happening to Oliver? And what is this house we never knew about? Megan's thoughts raced, unable to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Oliver, as if under hypnosis, calmly entered the old, half-collapsed house they hadn't noticed before. Megan and Tyler stood motionless, watching him from behind the trees. The door creaked and shut behind Oliver on its own. Megan felt her heart pounding in her chest. Her brother looked completely unaware of what was happening around him. Asterisk, asterisk. We have to follow him, Tyler whispered, tension in his voice. Megan, despite her fear, nodded. They couldn't leave Oliver alone in such a creepy place. Their decision made, they cautiously moved toward the house. As they approached the door, Megan suddenly heard a faint moan coming from inside. She stopped, looking around, as if to make sure it wasn't her imagination. Maybe it's Oliver, she thought, clenching her fists. Anxiety surged within her. She glanced at Tyler and saw that he had heard it too. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a dark corridor inside. The house was dimly lit, with only a few flickering lamps casting strange shadows on the walls. The peeling, mold-stained walls gave the place a decayed look, yet the unsettling feeling of someone's presence was all too real. Megan felt as if they were being watched. They stepped inside cautiously, trying not to make a sound. The hallway greeted them with a heavy smell of chemicals and medication, a jarring contrast to the house's abandonment. Tyler motioned for silence, and they crept further in, feeling the chill in the air and hearing faint noises from deeper within the building. Just a few steps in, they came upon a strange scene. Oliver was sitting in a chair in a dark room, surrounded by people in white coats. One of them was injecting something into his vein while placing a helmet with wires over his head. Oliver looked entirely vacant, as if trapped in a trance. Megan grabbed Tyler's hand and squeezed it tightly, trying to hold back tears. "What are they doing to him?" she whispered, panic surging through her mind. Tyler stayed silent, struggling to make sense of what they were witnessing. Suddenly, one of the doctors spoke. "The preparation has been successful. Oliver is almost ready for the final phase." The voice was calm but disturbingly devoid of emotion. What do they mean? Megan's thoughts raced, unable to find a rational explanation for what she had just seen. Her brother looked like a puppet in the hands of these people, and what they planned to do with him remained a horrifying mystery. Megan felt the ground sway beneath her feet. She glanced at Tyler, who stared at the scene in front of him. His expression was focused, but fear gleamed in his eyes. Neither of them knew what to do. Their friend and brother was in grave danger. Suddenly, one of the doctors in a white coat left the room where Oliver sat. Not knowing what else to do, Megan and Tyler dashed into a nearby room to avoid being seen. The doctor walked past them, and silence once again filled the hallway. In the darkness of the room, they switched on a flashlight. Papers were scattered across the table, catching their attention. Megan reached out and began sifting through the documents. One paper stood out. It revealed that this camp had operated as a psychiatric hospital since 1975 before it was shut down. "Tyler, look at this," Megan whispered, showing him the papers. Tyler leaned closer, reading along. The documents detailed experiments conducted on children with mental disorders. Wealthy clients were willing to pay large sums for quick and effective treatments. The children were perfect test subjects for these experiments. On another sheet, Megan found a contract that made her blood run cold. It bore her parents' signatures, stating that they had willingly submitted their children for research in exchange for large sums of money. Megan felt a knot of horror tighten in her stomach. My parents? They agreed to this? How could they? Suddenly, they heard footsteps approaching. Oliver's coming, Megan whispered urgently. They followed him as he made his way toward the exit of the terrifying building. Megan and Tyler slipped out of the room and trailed behind him. Halfway back to the camp, deep in the forest, Oliver suddenly stopped and turned. His gaze was empty, and his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here," he said in a voice that sounded like someone else was speaking through him. Megan and Tyler froze, gripped by fear. Without warning, Oliver lunged at them. His eyes burned with rage as he attacked like a wild animal. Tyler and Megan bolted toward the camp, desperately trying to escape him. But in the darkness of the night, it was hard to tell which direction to run. Oliver lunged at them, his eyes glinting with fury. Tyler grabbed Megan's hand, and they sprinted through the forest, stumbling over roots and trying desperately to find their way back to camp. Oliver's heavy breathing echoed behind them, and Megan felt paralyzed by the fear gripping every muscle in her body. Suddenly, Tyler tripped over a tree root and crashed to the ground. Oliver was on him in an instant, slamming his fist into Tyler's shoulder. Tyler hit the dirt hard, groaning in pain, but the injury wasn't too severe, just a bruise and a minor scratch. Megan, fighting back tears, rushed toward Tyler just as Oliver raised his hand, ready to strike again. "Oliver, stop! It's us!" Megan shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. But her brother didn't react. His vacant expression was chilling, as if the person she knew was no longer there. She dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "Please, it's me, your sister. Don't do this." For a brief moment, it seemed like Oliver recognized her, but it was fleeting. He raised his hand again. Then, just as suddenly, his expression shifted. His arm, poised to hit, fell limp at his side. The rage vanished, replaced by the same eerie blankness. Without a word, Oliver turned and calmly walked toward the direction of the camp, as if nothing had happened. Megan and Tyler were left alone in the darkness of the forest. Megan quickly pulled a water bottle from her backpack, rinsed Tyler's scratch, and carefully applied a bandage to his shoulder. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to stay focused. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice soft but full of concern. Tyler nodded, wincing as the pain started to dull. "It's just a bruise and a scratch. I'll be fine." "What happened to him?" Megan's voice wavered as she looked in the direction Oliver had gone. Despair filled her eyes. "He's not our brother anymore. What did they do to him?" Tyler exhaled slowly, then reached over and gently squeezed Megan's hand. Megan gripped his hand tightly, her tears falling freely now. "Our parents, they knew. I saw the papers. They signed him up for that awful experiment." They sat in silence for a few moments, surrounded by the sounds of the forest. Megan's heart ached, with anger at their parents, with grief for her brother, and with the crushing weight of everything they had endured. She knew they had to return to the camp, but the fear anchoring her in place felt insurmountable. "We have to do something, Megan," Tyler whispered, his gaze locked on hers. "We can't just leave things like this. We need to figure it out." Megan nodded slowly. "Yeah, but how?" Megan and Tyler returned to the camp, trying to hide their anxiety. Tyler clutched his arm, which throbbed painfully and was bruised from the blow, but he did his best to mask the pain. In the morning, one of the counselors approached him and asked what had happened to his arm. Sighing, Tyler explained that he had fallen while playing with some of the other boys. The counselors expressed sympathy and headed off to breakfast. Later, they approached Oliver to ask if he knew anything about what happened to Tyler. Oliver recounted the events of the previous night, unable to control his thoughts. As soon as he finished, the counselors realized that Tyler had discovered their experiments, which posed a threat to their operation. They decided that Tyler couldn't be allowed to survive. In a calculated move, the counselors brought Tyler a cupcake, pretending it was a gesture of comfort. But the cupcake was poisoned. Unaware of the danger, Tyler ate it. Megan noticed that Tyler had lost a lot of weight over the past 3 days, but Tyler brushed off her concern, saying it was just stress. That very day, Megan's world shattered. Her brother, Oliver, suddenly died from a heart attack. Megan's heart stopped for a moment, and tears streamed down her face. She couldn't believe she had lost the person she loved so dearly. Grief and hopelessness consumed her. Every step back to her room felt unbearable, and thoughts of her brother haunted her mind. Sitting on her bed, She clutched his old shirt in her hands, feeling herself fall apart inside. The cold grip of loneliness wrapped around her like a suffocating fog, making it hard to breathe. In those harrowing days, Megan noticed that Tyler grew even thinner. His once bright demeanor had faded, replaced by fear and anxiety in his gaze. A sinking feeling told Megan that this was no coincidence. One day, when Tyler could barely lift himself from the bed, the counselors brought him another cupcake. Without a second thought, Tyler took a bite, but within minutes, he clutched his stomach in agony. At that moment, Megan knew the cupcake was poisoned. There was no other explanation. She realized that something sinister was happening at the camp. Desperate, she stormed to the counselors, shouting, "Why is Tyler suffering? First my brother, and now him. I know it was you." Her voice echoed with anger, but inside, she felt empty. The counselors exchanged glances, smiling as they confirmed her worst fears. "Yes, we know what you've figured out," one of them said. "It's simple, a life for a life. If you want Tyler to survive, you need to agree to the experiments." Megan's heart filled with fear and helplessness. The counselors gave her 3 days to decide, promising that Tyler would live if she accepted their offer. During those days, Megan struggled with despair, haunted by the loss of her brother and the betrayal of her parents. In the end, as Tyler's condition grew critical, Megan gave in. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him too. Her parents had betrayed her, her brother was gone, and she couldn't let Tyler die. The counselors eagerly agreed, assuring her that Tyler would live if she underwent the experiment. They injected her with something, and she was taken to a room for testing. When Megan woke up, she found herself strapped to a chair, wearing a helmet connected to wires that seemed to coil around her mind. Panic surged through her as she looked around the room, until she saw Tyler sitting in the chair across from her. "I feel better," he whispered, though terror gleamed in his eyes. "I love you, and I can't live without you. Let's go through this hell together." Megan's heart clenched painfully. "I love you too," she whispered back. She knew the experiment would be horrific, turning them into test subjects. But Tyler's words gave her strength. Their love was the only hope they had left in this nightmare. In the darkened room, Megan and Tyler reached out toward each other, desperate to touch, even for just a moment, despite the chains that held them back. Their fingers almost met when, without warning, the lights flickered off, plunging them into total darkness. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Write in the comments how you like my story and be sure to like it. And remember, if you feel that something is off, don't ignore those feelings. Your intuition may point out dangers and could even save your life.